With new McValue at McDonald's, you always get more than you expect every day. So even if gas prices go up, you can buy a double cheeseburger and add a McChicken for $1. Or before game time, you can get $5 meal deals for the group. And if breakfast is about to end, get deals in the app to save before the bell. The choice is yours, and the choice with McValue is always more.
Prices and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value. Must opt into rewards for app deals.
Auto insurance can all seem the same until it comes time to use it. So don't get stuck paying more for less coverage. Switch to USAA Auto Insurance and you could start saving money in no time. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply. USAA.
This is probably the fourth or fifth time I've watched it, and every time I think a different thing has really hit me based on how I've watched it. And to me, this was really a movie about the ethics of how we as a society do not deal or process with pain.
Depending on what mood you're in or kind of like what age you are in life, you'll watch that and you'll come to a different conclusion, I think, at the end. And it's like, having watched all of this, do you think that Joel and Clem have got a real go, or do you think that they're going to do it again and go through the same mistakes? Hey everyone, joining Flixwatcher today, we have Jason.
Hello!
We have Andrew.
Oh my.
And we have Kobe.
Hey guys.
And we're finally going to be talking about Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Thank you as always to the mighty people for their mighty tunes that you can hear right now. Thanks to Ben from Rockwood Audio for editing our podcast. And please do remember to head over to Spotify and Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star rating and a glowing review when you get there. If you want to talk to us, get yourself over to @Flixwatcher on Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok, and maybe something else. I can't remember. We're at Flixwatcher there, or on Twitter, we're at FlixWatcherPod.
Hello, film fans. Our guests today are Jason and Andrew. Over to you, please, Andrew, to say hello to our listeners and tell them a little bit more about who you are and what you do, please.
Yes, hi, Dr. Andrew Johnstone. I'm a lecturer at King's College London, also the co-host/creator of Seemingly Unrelated, a podcast all about the little mundane things in life and the bizarre connections they have, like how sperm whales helped Margaret Thatcher get reelected, or how spelling bees brought an end to the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1888. That's what we do. It's all at seeminglyunrelatedpod.com.
Beautiful. And who are yourself? Who's the other person here?
Hi, everybody. I am Jason. I am the co-host of Seemingly Unrelated. When Andrew knows a lot, I do not. I go into every episode as sort of a combination audience stand-in, facilitator, and comedic sidekick. As Jason Howard, I am an award-winning writer, director, producer in digital media and live performance art. And as Jason Heat, in addition to being a podcast host, I am also a professional wrestling commentator and creative.
So I want to just ask a bit about the wrestling side of things, because as we stand now, Netflix has got WWE.
It does.
Wrestling. I haven't watched it since I was like 20. Since The Rock was doing his people's elbow all the time.
He's back, by the way.
Oh yeah, I've seen him, because it's obviously WWE and Netflix have gone, here's some money, and here's all of the money as well. Why don't you come back and do some...
I think it's more actually he's an incredibly savvy businessman in some ways, and he's
Hence
now
the money.
He's the president of the board. And so he recognizes, or he's on the board now, so he's now basically in charge. But also, you'll note that when The Rock returns to wrestling, it almost always comes immediately after a period where there is a public downturn in his opinion, whether it's because there's drama with him in the DC universe, or whether there is a scandal that emerges, or just generally his PR is sort of less than positive. Because he comes back to wrestling, he immediately makes a huge impact, he pops a rating, shows that he has value, he's beloved, sort of rehabs his image, and then goes back into Hollywood. And I think that you can find a bit of a pattern where he is very much aware that this is a safe space for him to exude star power and rehab his drawing power at times when there is backlash on him.
So after he did the Tooth Fairy, did he go straight back into wrestling?
No, this is after the fall. If you watch, like, Rock has that sort of rise up. It's very American story. He becomes incredibly, incredibly successful, and people like him up until the point that his public persona feels like it is maybe exhausting and exuding too much of that, and then people start to sour on him. But what he does have is this other built-in fan base, where as sort of maybe the mainstream begins to sour on him, which is very natural when we feel like people have become too successful and feel like they're too successful, he's able to return to people who effectively, wrestling fans often crave public acceptance. So the fact that a mainstream star comes back and is like, actually, I'm one of you, it's very unlikely that people would boo him. You have to be Hulk Hogan to be rejected. And to be Hulk Hogan is to have spent the last 10 years destroying your public legacy as a complete piece of shit racist. So, and it took 10 years for that to happen, for him to get booed out of the building. You really have to be the lowest of the low for pro wrestling to reject you.
How is it on Netflix, though?
There's only been one episode. I think that WWE these days it's very hot right now. They are doing a great job making big stars, and they have high ratings, but I find the show to be very boring and formulaic. I wish there's another company that's mainstream wrestling right now called AEW, and if you could meld the match quality and the spontaneity and the excitement of AEW with the consistency of the characters and the character development and the ability to actually focus a narrative to a substantial and like epic conclusion that WWE does, you would have a wrestling product I would truly enjoy. Right now, I lean more towards AEW because I think WWE is a bit overproduced.
Well, there we go. This is why you are a pro commentator, pro wrestling. We're here talking about Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which is your choice, Jason. Can you tell us, first of all, why you chose it? And then, well, you got 60 seconds in which to declare your synopsis. It might be tight, but you could give it a go.
All right, why did I choose it? First, I had the challenge of finding something that was on Netflix in the UK and not in the US. And so I went through a number of things that I sort of assumed would be available and weren't, until I finally was like, what about one of my two favorite movies of all time? I originally didn't lean towards Eternal Sunshine for two reasons. I was a bit intimidated to talk about it because it is something that's so near and dear and personal to me, and I was sure you had already done it. And then I realized that actually it hadn't been reviewed, it was on Netflix, and I was going to take the risk because all the other ones that I maybe felt a little safer to talk about, I couldn't. So instead, really opening up, this goes back and forth with Scott Pilgrim as my favorite movie of all time, and it really depends.
Oh, really?
I think where I am emotionally, right? Like
Sure.
when I'm in a good place, it's Scott Pilgrim, and when I'm in a bad place, it's Eternal Sunshine.
Well, we have reviewed Scott Pilgrim on here. You may or may not be interested in the scores.
I am.
Well, I mean, have a listen, let us know. But I think that the score on Scott Pilgrim was, we like the film. Scott himself is a bit of a tool, but this
Accurate.
which is where we kind of landed on. Okay, you have 60 seconds in which to tell us the synopsis of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and that time starts now.
What if you had the ability to remove all of your memories of an incredibly important person or relationship due to the overwhelming pain of loss, and then immediately regretted making that decision, but unfortunately it was too late? I think that is the question at the core of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which is mainly about a relationship between a man named Joel and a woman named Clementine, and seeing it happen in reverse as it is being wiped from Joel's mind, and he is desperately trying to figure out what he can save. And there is a side plot about the members of the lab that does the procedure and sort of the ultimate tertiary side effects of what it would be like to remove pain rather than deal with it or process it.
And Frodo Baggins creeps on your ex-girlfriend.
Patrick.
Right, so as Helen said at the top, she said finally Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. This has been our white whale film for the longest time. Many people have chosen this, but then it's disappeared off Netflix. So maybe we can retire now happily. Now we can retire happily.
It's a big moment for us.
Yeah.
Call me Ishmael.
You wanted a historic episode here, Jason. You made it happen.
Yeah. Thank you very much for choosing it. Helen, where do you sit on Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind?
So 2004 is the year that I fell in love with Mark Ruffalo from watching this film. So I think up until like this, like rom-coms generally were very much the same. They very much starred all the same people. They were always blonde. They were always kind of the perfect looking people. They all like had flashy jobs, worked in ad agencies and wore high heels. And then suddenly this comes along and Kate Winslet is wearing things that we wore and Jim Carrey's all sad and he kind of looks like the people we dated. And
your hair's quite similar to your hair used to change quite a lot, didn't it?
I used to dye my hair. I used to do things like that. I used to listen to the songs that they used to listen to. It basically was a romantic comedy drama for sad indie people. And yeah, I just loved it. And a Charlie Kaufman script as well.
It's got Charlie Kaufman all over, hasn't it?
Yeah, and it's just something that I'd never seen before. I don't really think it had been done before. It was funny, it was sad, it was a little bit confusing, it's a little bit weird. But yeah, it just kind of brought together a lot of things that I knew I wanted from films but hadn't quite happened for me. And yeah, love the cast. I'm not a huge Jim Carrey fan. I'm not a big fan of his comedy stuff, but I really love him in this. And I just adore Kate Winslet in this. And the soundtrack as well. It's a John Bryan soundtrack. And I bought the CD of this and listened to this.
Of course, it was like...
And just like
early
listening to it again, just like getting the feels from the little bits of sound that I like listen to and listened with my headphones and my Walkman and things like that, as you did in the noughties when we still kind of had Walkman. So yeah, I've got a lot of love for this film. Sad Beck as well. Everything's just a little bit sad, but there's also like really, really funny moments in it as well. So yeah, it was me in 2004 on film, I think.
Is it you in 2024?
Not really.
On Netflix?
No.
Not really?
No. But I still love it.
I did mean to check, but Jim Carrey, we've had him quite a few times on Flixwatcher.
We've had Jim and Andy.
The Great Beyond.
Yes, the Jim and Andy one.
Yeah, we've had The Mask. We've had Truman Show.
Yeah, I was going to say, we had Truman Show.
Yeah,
That's the other quintessential sad Jim Carrey movie. Like his
Which I like
serious
that one.
roles.
Yeah, exactly.
Those ones.
So we've had those ones. If someone tried to choose Ace Ventura, I'd probably say no.
No, you don't need that in your life.
No, not anymore.
What about Batman Forever?
I'd be up for that if it came on.
I'd definitely watch it. I like Batman Forever.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you get Naomi on, I'll come back to fill out the Seemingly Unrelated roster and I'll choose Batman Forever.
I don't think I think Warner Brothers holds a tight rein on.
Yeah, but
it's not going to.
Yeah, but
it's not gonna be on
Zaslav is an
Netflix.
idiot, so it could be.
It comes back.
What's on
Contact you
Netflix
straight away.
from WB is crazy.
It's on Max, buddy. It's on Max.
But we don't have
Yeah,
Max in the UK.
Oh, well, I don't know.
Yeah, I still don't think it'll come to Netflix though.
Anyways.
So Andrew, what your Eternal Sunshine?
Oh, as a 20-year-old back in 2005 when I first saw this movie, or 2004, I don't know, somewhere in that range. I absolutely loved it because I liked the music videos that Michel Gondry had directed, and I think that his vision was really great here. And as Jason well knows, I dated a Clementine not long after this, which ended as poorly as it ended in this movie, I think.
Maybe worse.
Maybe worse. It definitely ended with me.
You didn't get erased.
Balled up in tears somewhere at some point in time. But as a 40-year-old watching this movie, my first note is, sad bastard, the movie. The whole cold open, I was like, oh no, I'm going to hate this movie, which is not true. I did not hate it, but I think it has not, for me personally, aged super well in the last 20 years.
I think, well, there's a few areas for me which I'm like, not, I guess, post-Me Too side of things as well, which makes it like, oh, really dark and horrible, and they don't really address it that much. I like the Patrick storyline, and also just how films are done nowadays doesn't really hang together with me. But as like you guys, I saw it. I think this is one. I went traveling after university, came back in 2004, and then joined Netflix when they used to send out the DVDs, and I would rinse 3 films a night. And this is one of those films I watched quite early on in that I fell in love with it. I don't think I've seen it since then. So I was really, really keen to watch it. And when people chose it for this and then they couldn't watch it and then chose it again, I was like, okay, I'm not going to watch it until we watch it for this podcast. And I was like, oh no, it's just not kept that same magic that was in my mind. And a lot of it, I think, is the Patrick storyline, which is like super horrible.
But he is meant to be creepy in it. Like, he's not like...
Yeah, I agree.
It's meant to be creepy, but I don't think it kind of delves into how creepy it could be. I think if that was done now, I think they will still have that storyline, but there'll be more ramifications for him as a person. Or
yeah, he doesn't suffer any consequences.
Yeah.
Well, not that we see, but I think that ultimately the fact that the film doesn't provide a level of explicit judgment of him doesn't mean that you don't have to judge him. I feel like that is a shift in sort of societal expectations for people to explicitly tell us that something is heinous rather than for you to be allowed to have your own opinion based on your morality and going, actually, this is really heinous and this person is awful. I don't know that I need the filmmaker to tell me that this was a brutal betrayal of trust. Jim Carrey's reaction to it, I like that. I don't like what he does. It's awful. It's super creepy. But I think the hammer not being hit over the head with that, maybe it could be more. I'm not going to argue that if it was made now, it would be different. But I don't necessarily know that I think that that's always a positive in a film, to be honest.
Yeah, and also there's various points where you're watching it where the wheels off the company, the erasure, are coming off. And as they all kind of like, the wheels come off gradually. It's like, we're kind of introduced to the eraser thing as being like kind of fun, kind of quirky, a little bit weird. But then we're actually like, this is really, really awful. And like, this is a really bad thing. And what they've been doing is really, really terrible. And each kind of, so the Patrick stealing her memories and becoming this fake person, the whole thing with Mary's character and her relationship with the boss, just all of that. And at the end, we see her at the file. So the original ending was apparently she took all the files and basically she made like a book out of it, but kind of like her taking the stories and posting them off. It all kind of, the film is telling us that, this is a really terrible thing and it's not actually the fun, cutesy, kind of quirky thing we were led to believe. So Patrick is creepy. And the whole thing about not being able to see his face in those memories is really creepy. And I think it needs him to be creepy in it to kind of show that actually, this is actually really, really dark, even though we're kind of presenting it as kind of like light and frothy.
Comedy,
so Patrick has to be in there and no one comes out of this and goes, yeah, Patrick was my favorite. They're all like, Patrick, what a fucking creep. Like, he stole her panties. Like, he's just a really creepy guy and in a position of quite powerful, and that's how he uses it. And the power that the people who work at that organization have, they have a lot of power and they all choose to use it in really different ways. So it has to have Patrick to show that this is what happens when you use that kind of power in the wrong way. And they all use the power that they have working there in destructive ways.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that they're having a party around the people as they've been erased and, it's like, that's disrespectful.
But I wonder, though, does that not all effectively get done with just the fact that the doctor erased Mary's, like the fact, so we have Mark, the other problem with that is Mark Ruffalo, baby Ruffalo, as I was calling him, because he was so young, and I was like, oh my god, Mark Ruffalo, he was so cute. Anyway, I mean, he's still cute. I would 10 out of 10, but like baby Ruffalo, if it's just him and Mary, like what I was trying to say was he is kind of the better of all of the four people. Well, I guess Mary's sort of the hero, but like we're kind of supposed to feel a little bad for him, I think, at the end, that he's really in love with Mary, but Mary is still, even having had her mind erased, still pining after the doctor. But he doesn't really push back on Patrick hardly at all. He at first is like, oh, that's unethical. And then he's like, you stole her panties. That's funny. And you're like, well, shouldn't he get a comeuppance or something? Why not just have him and Mary?
Well, like, it's like bros in their 20s, in the noughties, like...
I just don't think this is a movie that is meant to be giving comeuppances. And I think that may be something that I can't fault you guys for maybe wanting that in retrospect, but I think that's a shift in expectations. I don't think this is a movie about comeuppance. This is a movie about avoidance. Explicitly, in watching this movie in a way that I never really understood when I was younger, because kind of my big takeaway is this is probably the fourth or fifth time I've watched it, and every time I think a different thing has really hit me based on how I've watched it. And to me, this was really a movie about the ethics of how we as a society do not deal or process with pain. That the idea that it is creating an opportunity for people to erase the pain rather than have to work through it or process it. And then by the end, without being really very explicit, with the way that Mary decides to deal with it makes it very clear that the film feels like that's not doable, it's not possible, and it's actually worse for you. And it's what dooms you to repeat things over and over again without the context context that you need for self-awareness. So if Patrick achieved comeuppance, he'd have to have awareness, and he doesn't get that growth because the only people who get growth are the people that go through the pain. So I just think that there's a level of an expectation of this character is bad, so I need to see a bad thing happen to them, as opposed to this character is bad because bad people exist in the world, and sometimes they're consequential strangers in your life and they have effects on you, and ultimately it's not Patrick's story. I don't know who would give him that comeuppance in the movie. Like, if Jim Carrey decks Patrick in the face, that doesn't actually add anything to the core story. The core story at the end, to me, is them going, now that we've been through this and we know the mistakes that we've made, is it worth it to do it again? And for me, like, watching it this time, a moment that never hit me, but did really hard. Because when I was young, it was all about the love story. I was a dude who, like, didn't necessarily often had success in terms of dating or relationships. And so that sort of tragic, sad boy love story really spoke to me. But this time, the most devastating moment was when the doctor's wife comes and just says, "You can have him. You already did." And that one line had more resonance to me than almost any other line, other than the beautiful moment at the end where, because to me everything is sort of about death, and this is a movie very much about death, and the relationship is about death, and it's coming to acceptance. And when she goes, "Well, this is the end, what are we going to do?" And he goes, "What do we do? Enjoy it." And it's about acceptance, because I think as a society, certainly in America, I can't speak to the UK, we have a real cultural problem with an inability to work through painful and negative emotions as a society. People try and avoid accountability. People try and avoid anything that might make them feel shame or guilt, in part because society doesn't know how to help people work through those and become a fully fledged functioning human being by going through that process. And I think that ultimately the removal of the memories is meant to provide a sort of quick fix that we as a society want, but you can't, and you have to work through it. And it's why Mary and Joel and Clementine all end up being better, healthier people by the end. And Patrick is, or the potential to be, I think they have the potential to be, as opposed to Patrick, who is going to do this exact same fucking thing in the future. Like, he learns nothing, and he has to learn nothing, because otherwise he actually becomes a protagonist instead of an antagonist.
I disagree that they become healthier at the end, because, I mean, that's an optimistic view of things. Because what it seems like to me, what they're saying is, I'm going to get tired of you, and I'm going to get bored with you. And then their response is, okay. So they're accepting that this is going to end again. And that's like kind of just a shitty.
But they might not this time. You've got to kind of, at the end of the film, you either take that they go through the relationship again and the same things happen and they end up with the same issues, or you take that they know from what they've heard about themselves and they realize that that is something that's them, and they now know that it's them, and they deal with that in a grown-up way and move forward and have a happy life. Now, whether, you know, depending on what mood you're in or kind of like what age you are in life, you'll watch that and you'll come to a different conclusion, I think, at the end. And it's like, having watched all of this, do you think that Joel and Clem have got a real go and they could have a go at it? Or do you think that they're going to do it again and go through the same mistakes? And I like that about it, how it doesn't indicate which it could be. It's what you think based on what you've seen, what you think they're going to do.
I agree with you 100%, Helen. I used to watch this movie and actually think more like Andrew, and today I watched it and I thought very clearly the other, in part because the film makes a very specific point of having Jim Carrey say, "I wish I had stayed. I wish I had gone against some of my natural bullshit that rubs you the wrong way to take a risk to be with you." And by going through the whole experience of going through his mind and watching everything and changing, trying to run from it and then accepting it, when faced with that scenario again, without the conscious memory of what he did, he does go after her. He doesn't make the same mistake twice. He makes a different choice. And when I hear them say those things, I hear that they had idealistic ideas of the other person person to start. And when those idealistic ideas of each other faded, they did not have the capacity to communicate and actually work through the reality of their situation. They had no choice but to face the reality by listening to those tapes. All the ugliness was laid bare, and they're still choosing to enter into it. I can't imagine anything that's potentially more healthy or productive than going into something eyes wide open. This is who you are. These are the potential flaws, and I'm going to choose to see if I can love you, not despite it, but with all of that as a holistic view instead of the sort of idealized version of you that I created. Because when you listen to the tapes, it's all about how they're not the person they thought they were.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how we've all seen it 20 years ago for the first time, had one reaction to it. Now, in 20 years later, which is insanity to me because I still remember watching it very, very clearly. Our interpretations.
It's like a different movie to me now. It's really weird.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic piece about it. And I think that's definitely going to lay into my repeat viewing score. So like this needs to be watched time and time again, and you'll take different things from it each time. The couple of places I think that really still held up. First of all, the cast. Like you talked about Baby Ruffalo, but every single person in this cast. I think this is probably the first time I saw David Cross, for example. First time I can't remember the actor that played alongside him as David Cross's partner, but I've seen her in so many TV shows and I always like it when she turns up.
Tom Wilkinson.
Yeah, Tom Wilkinson. Definitely the first time I saw Mark Ruffalo. And if it didn't say Mark Ruffalo in the intro, I probably wouldn't have recognised him for the first few minutes until he had a kind of Mark Ruffalo kind of tick about him. So to talk briefly about the cast and then briefly just talk about the second thing is the special effects, because lots of it was in camera and works really, really well. Like when he walked out of the library set, obviously it's a film, so he walked out the library set after not being able to see Patrick's face as Patrick was kissing Clementine, and then he walks into the set where we first see David Cross and the camera and the lights just shut down behind him, and then suddenly we're in a different set. And the amount of times we're panning around people and it's just all done in camera. It looks really, really good. And even the kind of freaky bits where the face is distorted, and that's like basic After Effects kind of effects. And you don't need to have a supercomputer to do that. But I think it still work really well as like a freaky, this looks gross, I don't like this side of things. So special effects and cast. Anyone want to take any of those discussion points?
When this movie came out, all the praise was being heaped on, in my memory, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim Carrey. Which is not wrong, he's good. But watching it this time, Kate Winslet is so... Her physicality. There's that point in the cold open where he's pulling up in the car and he says, it's freezing out there, you want to get in? Just her kicking her leg out, sort of, again, to Jason, I dated Clementine. I was like, yeah, I know. I've seen that. I've seen that kick before. Like, it's such a really... Just a really great performance. Up, down, top, left, right. Kate Winslet, to me, this time watching it, and I was like, she's incredible. Just incredible.
Have you seen Mayor of Easttown?
Yeah, she's really good.
And I was like, this is the same person.
I know. And just Lee, which came out in the UK this past year.
Yeah, I need to watch that, actually. I
really recommend. I think you'll like it. She's really good in that, too. And again, you're just like, the range on this woman is outrageous.
Which it was kind of playing against type from what she'd done before. But I mean, she was nominated way more than Jim Carrey was in terms of like recognition and stuff. But yeah, I love her in this. She's got so much energy and just, she just kind of felt like someone I knew. And I love her kind of like granny coat and like her weird fugly boots that she wears. And I think she's great. I love her.
Girl, you have got to try this Laneige lip mask. Trust me, my lips needed that love. Love these vanilla vibes from Kayali. That top note is just so smooth. Smooth and stunning. That's what you get with this K18 hair mask.
Those brands everybody's talking about, they're at Sephora. Discover the hype with the hottest names in beauty, including Laneige, Kayali, K18, and Rare Beauty. Only at Sephora.
I was maybe unfairly just sort of surprised in this round to be like, man, Kirsten Dunst is really good and really subtle, and maybe it's just Spider-Man fatigue of sort of marriage. I went back and was like, oh man, yeah, Kirsten Dunst was really, really good in this movie and is just very strong and sad and really wonderful. And her disdain for Patrick, I think, is a clear sign that guy is a schmuck. Because she's, in some ways, the moral center of the movie at a certain point. Also, in terms of the special effects, or the lack of special effects, the like practical effects we would call them, I just recently watched the Bourne movies for the first time, and some of them happened right around this sort of early 2000s range, and the camera cuts and stuff, they feel so dated. And one of the things that makes, I think, this movie, yes, there are elements that certainly feel like this is an early 2000s movie. I'm not going to pretend that it feels contemporary, but it doesn't feel like outdated in the sense that some of the Bourne stylization made me go, wow, we've come a long way in filmmaking, because these are tried and true tricks that make them timeless, and some of those moments work really well. The walking through and all the lights shutting off with the chunk, the buildings falling apart around them. I think it really creates a very imprint of what a mindscape falling apart could be that then I think really influenced, at least I'm realizing in retrospect, I did a play once that was all about somebody who was dying of brain cancer at the age of 30. And so they were making a mix CD for the daughter they'd never meet. And the whole play, the set was being dismantled behind them. It was like a record store full of CDs, and people in like medical masks were coming, and he didn't know what was happening, but as the play was happening, the whole set was being dismantled around him. It's only going back and watching this that it's not a one-to-one, but I'm like, oh, that concept was definitely imprinted on me from Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. The idea of somebody going through their mindscape and then it falling apart around them is really like affecting.
Yeah.
Apparently it was quite a hard shoot to do because they didn't know where their markers were going to be, and they had tons and tons of cameras. And from what I've heard, quite a lot of people had quite a hard time on it. And it was a super like short shoot as well. So it was very long days, a lot of cameras, a lot of improvised movement, a lot of kind of weird camera stuff, like when the Montauk house, when they kind of flood it at the end. So yeah, it sounds quite intense. So like that it all kind of came together is a good thing, because it sounded like it was kind of pretty insane to work on and make it all work.
I quite liked it when Jim Carrey played boy Jim Carrey, and even though it's completely him under a big table, but then switching with the smaller kids under a small table, I was like, I just thought that worked really well. And
I mean, the fact that you see Kate Winslet standing next to a refrigerator, she kneels down, Jim Carrey stands up, but he can't reach the
handle.
Like, yeah, so they had to have two sets that were almost identical, but one was big and one was normal size. That's really, I mean, like, compare Eternal Sunshine to The Science of Sleep, which is the next Michel Gondry movie, where I think he goes a little too far. Like, he just goes too much into and I actually like The Science of Sleep. I don't think it's a bad film, but he goes a little too far into just like unfettered dreamland. I feel the same way about The Science of Sleep I felt about like Waking Life, the Richard Linklater movie, where it's like, I just want you to come back like 10%. And I think this movie features so many of the same ideas that he's trying to execute, but as you say, like something about either the budget or maybe the editor who got a BAFTA off of this movie, they really brought that in, or maybe the Kaufman script just sort of reined him in a little bit, and it ends up becoming this really visceral experience throughout the whole movie that I did end up appreciating.
Anything else guys want to say before we head to the scores?
I think, like I was saying, this is probably the fourth or fifth time I've watched it. I do think mood, it's something where like, one of the last time I watched it before this was knee deep in the pandemic, in the midst of total depression.
Oh, wow.
And it was a watch along on Facebook. And it was actually like tons of people, they decided to air it for free on Facebook Live. And it was a weird communal moment of a lot of people all watching this movie while the chat was going on and just remembering it and talking about it. So that's a memory that I have associated. And then in this time, like I said, I understood this to be about acceptance and death in a way that I don't think I ever did before, where it was really about love and connection and things. And when I was younger, the Jim Carrey, Kate Winslet story was probably all I would have told you I remembered about the movie, along with Mark Ruffalo and Kirsten Dunst dancing in their underwear. That's a very iconic scene. Yeah. But in watching it this time, the parts I had forgotten and therefore really resonated with me are the employee story in the house and how like subtle and depth that is to support all of it, and also how it's a fantastical concept, but this is the most banal office. Like, it is such a real place in all the shitty offices and shitty doctors' places and people who are not qualified to be doing this kind of work, and you invite them into your home. I just think that grounding it in such a reality really allows the dream stuff to feel dreamy rather than fantastical.
There's a version of this film where it is like super expensive, super high end.
Like a sci-fi.
Even if Black Mirror did this, it would be like, you go into like a super high end. Well,
I was gonna say Black Mirror did do this, and I would actually recommend as a companion piece what I think ends up executing the message better, in my opinion, of love is boring and painful, but it's worth it, is San Junipero.
Yeah. I mean, San Junipero is stellar.
Yeah, I mean, that to me, but like, I'm a guy who said like San Junipero is the best piece of fiction created in the 2010s. Like,
I'll have to check this out.
I love San Junipero, but there's a speech about what love is that I think clearly the people who wrote that watched this movie and had a little extra they wanted to toss in on that. I do want to just bring this up as speaking for the community on this one. The 2 times I jumped out of this movie were the F slur that Kate Winslet yells at Jim Carrey, and then his gay panic moment when she's like, do you live with a man or a woman? And he's like, female. Oh, I'm not gay. That hasn't aged well.
I agree with that. Yes. I completely forgot that the F word was in there. Like, that was startling, and I think even if you can make a character defense of the sort of gay panic moment, and I think you'd have to stretch to do it, but there could be a case that was really unfortunate for the slur to be a part of it.
It was on par, I would say, with the Bill and Ted F slur of being like, whoa, okay.
Whoa. When he says man or woman, it's like, does it matter? Either way, it's going to potentially result to you not either breaking up a relationship or you're not going to be together. So what does it matter who they are?
Remember, we're still kind of like in the noughties, the 90s were not that long ago. It's like there's so many films that are like that.
I'm not trying not to give it a pass because of the time it was made. I'm trying to just set against the fact that I'm just trying to re-emphasize that it doesn't matter who the other person is.
I think it's clunky, but again, I think you could make a case in that moment that it's meant to be a character-defining thing, that for her it wouldn't matter and for him it would, and that is a representation that he is more uptight and she is more open. I don't know that it works, but I do think that's the intent. I think she does not receive comeuppance for being so incredibly offensive in a moment when she yells the thing. And unlike Patrick, as a character you're supposed to root for and emphasize, I think her accountability is really missing. This is a hard left before we score, but I also want to add to Helen's thoughts about the music. I just think that Beck song, along with like the Blower's Daughter from Closer, those are probably the 2 songs that like oh god, like when I think of songs that are so completely identified to a movie and a time period and an emotional part of my life and who I was at a time, those 2 songs, I mean, like, there's a very specific period of my life I'm brought back to by those songs, and they were 100% on the same mix that I made.
Yeah.
I haven't revisited Closer since it first came out. I don't know if it hangs up.
I was at a wedding recently and they had like, the incidental kind of music, like where you're just kind of like chilling, and they had that, and it was just like, takes you to the moment. The blue.
Which one are you asking about, Andrew? The Beck one or the Blower's Daughter?
But actually, I don't know either off the top of my head.
The Beck song is the Everybody's Gotta Love Sometimes. It's the closing credits music. It's repeated as a motif throughout the whole movie.
Gotcha.
The cover.
And then Blower's Daughter is the and
Damien
so
Rice.
It is just like you said it would be.
Life
I will say
easy on
me.
Most of the time.
But it seems to be associated with the 2004 film Closer.
Yeah.
That's what I said. Yeah. I was saying this.
Which but I don't know what that movie is.
Oh, you should watch it.
Yes,
it's based on a play. I think that one's going to hold up even harder in modern day light.
Part of it is also how much you like Clive Owen, because Clive Owen's only good in 2 films that I can think of.
Oh, he's literally one of my favorite actors,
Really?
Kobe. Where are we about to fight?
Natalie Portman wears a pink wig in this, so like...
Now, Natalie Portman's cool in this, but I mean,
And it's Julia Roberts in it, Jude Law.
I love Jude Law.
If you love a relationship drama about four people who hate each other so much they have to fuck each other, this is a movie for you. And
it features Postman's Park in London as well. Like, it's got some good London.
I hate London too.
Sites. If you want to watch a film, this is the one for you. This
was the second play I ever directed.
Gotcha.
I was obsessed with this play. And to put it in perspective as well, then we'll move on. One, it still to this day has one of my favorite lines in all of theater, which is, have you ever seen a human heart? It looks like a fist wrapped in blood, which is fantastic. Two, this is the play / movie that Panic at the Disco named their songs Lying is the Most Fun a Girl Can Have Without Taking Her Clothes Off, but It's Better If You Do, comes specifically from this. And then so does Fall Out Boy, also has a song based on this play. So there's a very specific lens that this play represents that leads to that sort of pop emo.
2004 was a great year for this specific.
Yeah.
No, that sounds horrible.
Listen, Ariana Grande boy.
The last thing I want to say is, so Kate Winslet and the other female actor in this,
Kirsten Dunst.
Yeah, so last year you talked about Kate Winslet playing Lee in the docu-biopic about her life.
Yeah.
And then last year, 2024, we had Civil War, where Kirsten Dunst played a character called Lee, based off of that same character. Do you not know that?
I didn't see Civil War.
Oh, yeah. So Civil War, she plays a war photographer.
I know enough about the first one.
So she plays a war photographer who's called Lee, and Lee was called Lee for that character who Kate Winslet plays in the biopic. So I haven't seen the biopic, but that's my first introduction to Lee.
It's very famous.
AKA Kate Winslet. And I just realised early on today that was an interesting connection, that they both played sort of the same character.
Also, Lee features Andy Samberg trying to do his Jim Carrey pivot and actually doing pretty good. Pretty good.
I can imagine Andy Samberg being a decent dramatic actor.
Yeah.
Should we get to the scores?
Let's.
I'm Sam Clements, host of the 90 Minutes or Less Film Festival, another podcast in the Stripped Media family, a podcast that celebrates movies under 90 minutes long. Each episode, I'm joined by a special guest who selects a movie to join our prestigious lineup. Past guests have included fellow Stripped Media family members Martin and Sam from Song by Song, and Kobe from Flixwatcher, and Dave from The Wire Stripped. Search for us now on the app you're currently listening to this podcast, or join us at 90minfilmfest.com.
So welcome to our Flixwatcher scores. All of the scores are out of 5, and we'll start with you, please, Jason, because you picked it with your recommendability.
5. I think, like this movie, or this movie ends up not being the thing that's entirely for you, everyone should see this movie. I can't imagine anyone that wouldn't at least be beneficial from having this as part of their cinematic conversation.
Andrew?
I was a bit torn on this because I do think that if you are... one, I appreciate the cinematic quality, but also if you're in your 20s, I would totally be giving it a 5. But I feel like the older you get, the less likable these main characters are and the harder it is to watch this movie. So I just split the difference and said I'd give it like a 3.5.
Helen?
So I kind of was wondering what someone who was in their 20s now coming to it would kind of feel. And I kind of went to Letterboxd because I thought that would be the place to kind of see if I could dig out some kind of, oh, this is crap, this is weird, this is creepy. But everyone still seemed to love it. So I was kind of wondering how it might land with a younger audience, but I couldn't see that'd be the place where I normally find those kind of feelings towards it, people coming to it new, but people are still coming to it new and taking it on in different ways. So I kind of feel like if you haven't seen it, where have you been? It just kind of feels like one of those ones that has just gone so far into popular kind of culture and existence that if you haven't seen it, then I don't know how you missed it. And even though I kind of feel differently about it now, and I do feel that Clem is kind of a little bit manic pixie dream girlish-ish in places, I do still really like it. And I think, same as what you were saying, Jason, about how coming to it from different ways, in that when I watched it the first time round, I kind of found it a lot funnier and a lot quirkier, whereas now I find it a bit more kind of soulful and look for the different angles. I think it's a really interesting one to keep coming back to. So I'm going to give it a 4.7.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 4.5. It's an interesting one. I've only seen it twice, but I guess, as everyone said here, very, very, very different reactions to it each time I've seen it. And I like that in the film. And I think it's a film that people should watch because it's got some interesting things to say. And what you take away from it will be a good discussion to have. I think we've had a great discussion about it. So I wouldn't want to deny anyone in that kind of scenario. But I think this is the kind of film, I'm sure it's Michel Gondry's biggest hits.
Definitely.
I did really like Big Hand Rewind, although I've only seen that once.
I love that movie.
And he did an episode of Flight of the Conchords, which I need to revisit because I just checked his IMDb page. I can't see it being that big a hit, though. I don't think it would have crossed over. It would have pulled some Jim Carrey people in, but I think there's still a lot of people who haven't seen this film. So it's good to see. It's good to hear from your research, Helen, that people are still finding it. Repeat viewing score, Jason.
I'm going to give it I'll say a 4.2 for me. I was listening, to your Spider-Verse, and you were sort of like, I could watch this every day, every time. And I'm like, all right, that's a 5. I do think this is a movie that I return to consistently, but I think it needs to be space. And I also think mood really affects the ability. Like, this is a movie that now that I've seen it, there's a certain zone or space that I want to give to it that even in prepping for this show, I didn't quite feel like I had the ability to do. But I think it is the 4th or 5th time I've watched it, and every time something new, and the more space between, the more I've gotten something different out of it. I don't know if I watch this movie every year, it would do that for me, but if I watch it every decade, I think I come to it at a different time in my life, and I go, I'm really getting something new, or the fact that I've experienced something different in my life allows me to see elements of this film that were not what I took from it the first time.
Andrew.
First of all, I just want to note, I can't believe we didn't even talk about the manic pixie dream girl element of it, because
I was going to say, when did Garden State come out? Was that 2004 as well?
Yeah, I think so. It was the year.
Well, this walked so Garden State could run.
But there's a really interesting line about that too. Anyway, we'll have to have another episode where Jason and I talk more about this movie. You can't watch this too often, man. It's a lot. And at the same time, it degraded substantially. Like, I changed my Netflix from 2 thumbs up to 1 thumbs up today after watching it because it really tumbled in my... Like, I remembered it being amazing, and I watched it and sort of was like, I fucking hate these people. I hate every character in this movie except Mary. So I'm giving it repeat viewing score... I think a 1. I think waiting 20 years to watch it again is the right move.
Helen.
I mean, you can watch this film too much. I mean, there was a time where I watched it a lot when I first got it on DVD. I mean, I haven't watched it. I mean, I think maybe when it came on Netflix, when I first kind of got Netflix, so like 5 or 6 years ago, I probably would have watched it most recently. But
hold on, we've had this podcast for at least 8 years. So
have we? It's just me denying time.
8 years? Crikey. Yeah.
Maybe. So maybe then. I don't know. I have watched it on Netflix, but I've watched it I've seen Bob Ruffalo dancing in his pants a lot.
And this is post Poor Things.
Yes. 13 Going on 30 also came out this year. So it was a great year for Mark Ruffalo dancing. Changed my life forever. But yeah, I definitely felt differently about it. In fact, I'm going to go in and bump my Letterboxd score up to a 5 because I actually really liked it more. And even though I do find some of the character parts of it cringe a bit like that, I think maybe we're meant to a little bit in reflection. Like, we're not perfect. Humans aren't perfect. We're kind of weird and messy. So for repeat viewing, I'm going to give it a solid 4 because also the structure is kind of weird. And I feel that going back to it and trying working out what's in the right order and things like that. And it also messes with how you remember it as well because the structure and things is kind of weird.
So 4. I'm going to go for 4.6 here. And I know I've only watched it twice. I kind of think about the repeat viewing score, high repeat viewing scores in 2 ways. One is the film you can watch at any moment, at any second of the day, and you'll probably watch it every single day for the rest of your life. The second is the film that you have to watch again. and you probably won't watch it that frequently, but there's something in the layering, there's something in how it makes you feel, there's something in how it's portrayed, means that you have to watch it again and you'll get something out of it each different time. And that's something you're not going to watch every year. Like I said, this is every few years, but it will be something that comes back to you. And a lot of these are the kind of puzzle box films, your Donnie Darko kind of things, the simple ones where you think, I need to watch this again to try and get inside and outside of it. Mulholland Drive. But they're also the ones where, like Back to the Future, where if someone said, do you want to watch Back to the Future? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to watch it right now. So it's high, but it's not going to be like, I'm not going to watch it all the time. A small screen score. Has anyone seen this in the cinema?
Yeah.
I think I did.
The first time I saw it.
Okay, well, let's go to yourself, Jason, first. Small screen score.
I'm going to give it a 5. I love it in the cinema, but honestly, most of my memories are watching it on a small screen. I think that this is an ideal example of a movie that you can watch. Like, there's a very specific subset of movies that I think the intimacy of watching it alone and I have to give some extra points to that Facebook watch, because at a time in my life that was so truly the lowest I've maybe ever been, and at a time when connection was really difficult and my girlfriend was out for a week in a risky situation, but to make money, she had to go do an event and she was staying in a hotel, and I was truly alone. Watching this movie on my laptop in bed with hundreds and thousands of strangers was one of those really core moments of a movie washing back over me and the watching it with people on that small screen. So if only for that, I have to give it 5, because in the year 2020, I think it might have been, after June, that might be one of my only 2 positive memories of the year.
Andrew?
I really think that my favorite part of this movie is Gondry's playing around and doing really interesting things with lighting and with effects. And so I believe if you're going to watch this movie, try to see it at the cinema, because I think it's going to enhance the experience. That being said, there's still enough intimacy that I don't think it absolutely positively needs to be. So I'm going to go right down the middle and say 2.5 stars.
Helen?
I've seen it at the cinema twice. I saw it twice when it came out.
Oh, wow.
That's how much I enjoyed seeing it. If you're interested and you're in London, it's on at the Prince Charles, so you can go and see it. It's one of the ones that...
As long as it's not in the basement of the Prince Charles, it's great.
That weird curve. We love the Prince Charles. I know, it's a kind of weird one. Obviously you should go and see it on the big screen because it looks really great and it was made to be that way. But yeah, I also watched it quite intensely on DVD, and I do think it has kind of that, it's quite a personal film. You might cry, you might get really excited by Mark Ruffalo in his pants. Do you want to share that with people? I don't know. Maybe just keep that secret. So I'm going to give it a 4.
I've only ever seen it on a small screen, and I think on this rewatch, because I think you have 2 different film stock here. I'm sure there's the film stock and there's kind of digital video, which I think was used quite a lot when there's erasing the mind. And I think that works a lot better on a small screen. And I'm thinking about this year, 28 years later, is coming out, and I need to watch 28 Days Later again. But I'm also kind of aware that how grainy that's going to look and how bad that's going to look.
It looks like garbage, Kobe.
So I think that kind of thing probably works better on the smaller screen.
Looks like garbage.
Even though that was the intention with 28 Days Later, was to look like that. So that was part of the intention, but it's still really?
New one's filmed on an iPhone.
Yeah, but still, there's an iPhone now versus mini DV camera 2003. It's different.
Wait, it's 28 Days Later it's still a great movie, but boy, you're oh, my eyes. Oh, God.
It was Anthony Dodmantle did that, wasn't it? Part of the Dogma people. So they had to think with no external lights, also on all this kind of, had all these different categories for shooting it. Anyway, my point is that doesn't look, I don't think it's going to look great on the camera, on a bigger screen. And I think there's some sections of this that, even though the special effects are in camera and it work well, I don't think they would look that great on a big screen. Anyway, 4. Engagement score, Jason.
I'm going to go 4.6. I mean, I really do have a very hard time turning away from this movie and wouldn't want to turn it off. I've seen it enough times now that I guess I can't give it, or I'm too phone addicted to go full 5, which I want to. But I mean, I think particularly a first watch, it's really going to be very difficult to look away, or it would be very detrimental to your viewing experience. So, 4.7. I'm going 4.7.
Andrew.
Yeah, there's a few times watching this where I did go to the phone, and I also at one point in time paused the movie to like get up and just go for a stretch, and like it was a slog. It was it's not bad. It's only an hour and 47 minutes, but this movie feels longer than an hour and 47. Me personally.
I don't think there's ever been anything in life that you and I have been more opposite on than this movie, actually, because like with Nosferatu, all sorts of stuff, like truly there is a taste that differentiates us when it comes to this, because like just wildly different experiences.
Yeah, I really felt a bit dragged down. With a few exceptions, there were some times where I really got engaged. That shot that, Helen, you mentioned the DVD. I can see the DVD cover because it's the shot of them laying on the ice. Amazing, yeah. And there's the crack that makes the four quadrants. Really incredible shot composition. So, like, there are parts that pull you in, but then there's also parts in the movie that just dragged me out. I'm going, again, 2.5 stars.
Helen.
Yeah, so, like, I just remember watching it and needing to see it again just to kind of reorder everything, and then subsequent watches, like there's still bits that I'm like, oh yeah, that bit's kind of there, and like I'd kind of forgotten little bits like that, but now I've kind of like seen it so many times that it doesn't feel like I need to be into it as much. So I'm gonna give it a solid 4 for that, because yeah, there are some like slower bits, and then there's some other bits that are just a bit like, where is this going? Like, why is he in the sink? Like, he's just been flushed down the sink and he's hammering a bird with a hammer. There's just so much going on in it, but now I kind of know it's coming. Yeah, it's so sad, little Jolie.
So I've gone for a 5 here. Again, like this is my second watch, and it's one of those things where you have to like have, for me, eyes open, like looking at it, making sure you're paying attention to the screen. Maybe once you've watched it 5 or so times, you can kind of phase in and out, but this is based on my only second viewing and the fact that I'll probably watch it once maximum every 5 years, I would have thought, so it wouldn't be like a lazy watch for me going forward. That gives us an overall score of 3.98125. Just missed the 4 club.
Just missed it, yeah.
But I think it's a decent innings there anyway. Jason.
I'm sorry. I apologize to
Michel Gondry. Thank you.
Oh, he's on my shirt. I've got this like shirt with him on.
She's got Michel Gondry World shirt and filmed the Dunst de Pieps, was it?
Well, I'm glad we had a good run for Seemingly Unrelated, and I'm sorry that this podcast has caused me to want to erase Andrew Johnstone from my mind.
I do find how interesting sometimes people do take like proper offence to scorings that happen on there.
I feel like we should offer some complimentary therapy for some pod couples.
I think it's interesting to see perspective. I think that it's interesting to see which parts all of us sort of either responded to positively or have changed, and also as that relates to individual people, also as it relates to, I think, like what current conventional wisdom is about how a film should be structured and the messages that it sends and things like that. So I think that's useful. I think that Andrew has gone on quite a journey over the last 20 years, and this is more my understanding of how he sees art. This was very instructional, and I don't mean that in a shitty euphemistic way. I mean, actually, I'm like, oh, okay, now I know more about what my friend looks for, and I don't think I've ever been a mystery as to what I look for. Is it sad? Death?
Guys, let everyone know where we can find you online. I want to say goodbye to the listeners.
So yes, you can find our podcast, Seemingly Unrelated, pod.com. That's the website. We talk about, well, we don't talk enough about movies. Maybe we'll have to do some movie-related episodes. But if you care about my opinion, if you heard my movie opinion, you can find me on Letterboxd as Seems Unrelated, because Seemingly Unrelated didn't fit. There's not enough characters. But you can find me on Letterboxd as Seems Unrelated, and you can see me slagging off some movies and then really liking things like Kneecap, which was my #1 movie of 2024.
Oh, there you go. So I was going to ask you if Kneecap made it to yourself yet, Jason.
I have not seen Kneecap, no.
It'll be interesting to see how Americans take to it.
Okay, I'll take a look. If you enjoyed the banter and discussion between myself and the professor, then you can enjoy that every other week as you listen to Seemingly Unrelated, available wherever you get your podcasts. That includes YouTube, it includes Apple Podcast, and of course Spotify. And then if you're interested in my opinions on media, I am on LinkedIn at Jason Howard, and I'm going to be trying to do reflections on every single graphic novel I read this year. Last year I read 145. So if you are curious about my thoughts on the wonderful world of superhero fiction, what works and what doesn't, that's a place to potentially get a deep dive.
Perfect, guys. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you very much for finally landing Moby Dick for us.
Yes, thank you. And I will be forgetting all of this as soon as I take my pills.
That's more like an Arrested Development plot.
Catch you later, guys.
Thanks
Bye.
for coming on. Bye.
Bye.
Enjoyed this episode of Flixwatcher podcast? Why not leave us a 5-star review on iTunes? You can also follow us at FlixWatcherPod on Twitter, and we're at FlixWatcher on Instagram. Thanks as always to the mighty people for their mighty tunes and Rockwood Audio's editing skills. If you're looking to get your podcast edited as sweet as this, get in touch with Rockwood, ROKK Wood Audio. Tell them Flixwatcher sent you.
You just heard a Stripped Media production.